It's not a theorem. They're not theorems. You need to add an extra assumption about what goes on inside households, which is never stated. If we now revisit the argument of the preceding paragraph about welfare economics in the context of households with 2 or more adults, teenagers who are learning how to spend money, etc., the situation is worse. Can we even represent each household by a preference map? If so, will it have the usually assumed convexity properties? Or will external effects within the household give rise to ill-behaved Bergson frontiers? Can we assume intra-household Pareto allocations? Do the children who spend money know what is best for them? Even if they don't, is this still the least bad way for them to learn? Let them make their own mistakes. That, of course, was part of John Stuart Mill's philosophy. People should be allowed to learn by making their own mistake. Here again, in welfare economics, questions start to arise at an alarming rate. Questions that are central, not marginal, not peripheral. Questions that are central to the heart of welfare economics and not to be shunted aside as unimportant. To conclude, it is now over 75 years since Coase issued his warning that economists in building up a theory have often omitted to examine the foundations on which it was erected. Unfortunately, the history of consumer theory bears witness to the need for that warning, for there has been and continues to be a singular casualness in the literature about whether the fundamental concept of the consumer refers to an individual or to a household. There are strong grounds for insisting that the consumer must mean household, albeit sometimes a one-person household, of course. And when this is taken seriously, a number of pressing issues arise, both in explanatory theory and in welfare economics, not least the fact that both the standard theorems of welfare economics are invalid. Thank you.
In this box diagram, I thought that previously you provided the solution to this, if I understood what you were saying, because you said that even we can see the household having a social welfare function of itself. So couldn't we construct a social welfare function that represents some kind of this indifference care for the household and then juxtapose it on this box, then that would solve the problem, if I understood well.
If the two theorems of welfare economics were stated not as they are normally stated, but were stated by saying everything that is usually said and then adding, we assume that within households commodities are allocated in a Pareto efficient manner, then of course all would be well. But that is never stated, and it would not be obviously reasonable to state it either. Not at all reasonable. There are economic forces at work pushing people, more generally firms and households, to positions like this. If the economy is strongly competitive, people are being pushed into this kind of tangency or equivalent corner position. There is no economic pressure inside the household to push people to efficient allocations. Therefore, it would be a very strong extra assumption Of course, if you're happy to assume that, of course, every widow or every parent does behave in that way inside the household, then you're okay. But you need to say it openly, because then people will think, it's not obvious. Could be true. I mean, in my own section B, if the widow behaves as in my section B, then this does lead to a Pareto efficient allocation between the three people, say the one individual there and the two individuals here. But if the widow doesn't behave in that way, then we come here, but Pareto efficient allocation of resources between the three people doesn't follow.
Small question. In this analysis, in this analysis, actually what we are assuming, and that is the way that we do our analysis, is that we assume our consumer or consumer unit is selfish. They are thinking in terms of within the family transactions or exchanges. What happens when we find that our consumer or consumer unit is not selfish? So how to capture, actually we say large literature on that, how to capture the inter-family, like charity and other things that comes into the picture, because it would have an impact on consumer behavior within the family. So the assumption about the selfishness and charity makes the theory, the applications of theory very, very tricky. Thank you.
Of course, I am not wishing to stipulate what should be assumed about households. I only wish to make the point that not enough is generally assumed about households. It's all left floating in the air. I'd be very happy to see consumer theory having more... Yeah, let me go back a moment. Some of you may remember that quite a long time ago now, Kelvin Lancaster criticised consumer theory on the grounds that it had become an exercise in drawing the minimum of conclusions from the minimum of assumptions. And he wanted to put more substance back. And I'd be very happy to see more substance put into consumer theory, and probably it needs to be made more social. It matters what you assume about society and individuals in society and so on. It matters what you assume about the attitudes and the ethics of parents, guardians and so on. And it may well be that by changing course and not saying the less we can assume the better, if economists doing consumer and household theory were prepared to put in more substance, to assume something more substantial and more content in it, then they would be able to say more. In a very small way. I started doing that even here with my household and, with my widow and the child.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Simon, for a very challenging presentation. Now there's coffee served at the lobby, and you can please help yourselves. But can we move on to the panel sessions just now without